the Ice Kingdom has arrived. They fought the Forest Kingdom and they won. And with that win also came the eternal and cruel coldness of winter. In this cold new kingdom lives Otter, a poor young cook who feeds the Viking warriors that still fight the Ice Kingdom and wish for a greener future. But inside his heart lights a fire that might just hold the power that's needed to turn the tides of war and end the winter once and for all. This is Otter of the Flame. Let's talk about Redwood for a second. I think there are 3, if not 4, Redwood rants hidden throughout my 174 videos in this channel. If you found them all, then comment below because I've literally forgotten which videos were. But even though I don't want to talk about it for potentially the 5th time, I think for this one we still have to go through it. So let's just talk about the 2 main problems that I think plague Redwood. The first and obvious thing is the pacing of the manga, from the original chapter being somehow stretched into 3 to the thing that should have happened within the first 3 to 4 chapters, meeting the Hunters Guild that is literally in the name of the English title, only happening when this manga was cancelled. The entire pacing of this manga was too slow, which made things too boring. The second major problem is that the majority of the manga as is the very boring exam arc that starts right after the introductory chapters. While I don't think having an exam arc this early into the series is necessarily bad, just look at Hunter x Hunter, the first half of this arc is extremely uneventful, which I think probably led to the downfall of the entire series. Rather than spending the early goings of the manga showing us some of the more interesting parts of this world, we spend it having our main character trying not to bore himself from brushing floors. It all leads to a manga that was riddled with pacing and structural problems, which probably caused it its swift and quick cancellation. But that's not the whole story of Redwood. Because despite all its flaws, the manga ended up being one of the most popular recent X titles, at least here in the West. It wasn't the first X title to be released physically by Viz, but if you look at the rest of the other X titles by the likes of Tite Kubo, Watsuki, Kishimoto, Redwood stands as the only X title that was ever released physically by a mangaka not famous by another successful manga. And that's a pretty big deal. But I can see why. The first chapter really captured people's attentions. This was a manga with a really cool setting and premise, but more than that, it was a manga with such a unique style. With its gorgeous and vibrant art style, the unique paneling, the cool characters and character designs, the monsters that send genuine chills on our spine, and the big boobed, big muscled, big tall ladies that send genuine chills onto something else, Redwood is a manga where you can grab pretty much any panel. It looked like something really cool and like something you're going to enjoy reading. Which is why I think people all over the world got excited to see Yuki Kawaguchi, the mangaka, return with something new. And that something is none other than today's manga, Otter of the Flame. So, how does it compare? Well, first let's talk about the plot of the manga. This is the first Viking manga I remember seeing in weekly This is the first Viking manga I remember being in weekly Shonen Jump. And it's all about Otter. A boy lives in a village ravaged by never-ending winter. That's something that has been happening all over the Forest Kingdom since the Ice Kingdom invaded. Otter decides to go to a fortress to help Viking warriors and to help provide for his little sister, but he's not a warrior himself. Instead, his job is to cook and keeping things lit for his fellow Vikings. At first, the job doesn't sound too bad, as while there are many injured Vikings all around, he mostly cooks and breathes onto fire. Look, I understand. But I promise you that that last part is indeed important enough to mention in the synopsis of the video. Anyways, the Vikings seem to generally support him and his job, especially the necessarily tall, buff, and big-boobed warrior Alajoki. I'm actually curious to know if it was Kawaguchi that needed to have his trademark buff women on the cast, or if it was like a clause on his contract by the editors. Anyways, things are going fine until they aren't, as the Ice Kingdom attacks the fortress where Otter is working, and their giant ice monsters and the goddamn necromancer with a zombie army kinda destroy the group of normal Viking humans until only Otter is left. Guarding the final flame of the fortress, as the monsters pile unfocused onto him, it suddenly gains the power of a flaming sword and shield given upon him by a fire spirit whom he breathed on. See? The fire spirit later reveals herself to be a girl-like spirit named Filja, which, if I pronounce that wrong, no shit. She helps him defeat the army, and the chapter ends with her telling him that she will help him end the endless winter. So, how does it compare to Redwood's first chapter? Well, it compares a lot actually. Both series are battle shonens rooted in European folklore. Both of them are about a boy who's not particularly strong, but wants to be thanks to their father, and is pretty useless in a fight until they unlock a magical weapon that lets them fight the monsters of their world. Both feature also clearly archetypal style of female character, which I've talked about enough, as both chapters really have the same strong points. Art-wise, this is perfect. The paneling is on point, the character design is great, the entire atmosphere of the manga is perfect. It puts I Said Gil to even more shame than it already had. And the concept and premise of the world looks interesting, although a bit expository, but you can help but want to learn and see more of it. It is as good of a chapter 1 as you could realistically want a manga to be. But if we go back to the problems of Redwood, you can kind of start to see the reason why I'm not that sold, at least not yet. I see a lot of people saying that Otter is so much better than Redwood, and I don't see it right now. Sure, if we compare the entirety of Redwood against the first chapter of Otter, it's pretty obvious which one has the overall quality, but if you exclusively compare the two first chapters of each series, they're mostly of the same quality. Kawaguchi has already proven to me that he can deliver on a killer first chapter and an interesting premise. What he hasn't done is prove that he is able to sustain that level of quality throughout an entire series. Call me in about 9 chapters and I'll be more sure if the manga is good or not. And yes, this is the main problem of a YouTube series like this one. I am well aware that my opinions on chapter 1 of any manga doesn't really mean anything in the long run. Actually, if you go back to the video on the first chapter of Redwood all the way back in the first year of the channel, you'll see that I praise it a lot. This is a series that is all about those first impressions of the debut chapter. If things improve or get worse, it's irrelevant. That said, I've been doing this for long enough that I'm starting to discover artists that I've covered before. That allows me to have a little bit more context onto their style, onto their strong and weak points. And that makes this manga in specific so much hard to judge the artists of the entire series on the first chapter alone without any kind of biases. But all in all, yes, this is a really good first chapter, and if the quality maintains, it can very much stay in the magazine. Again, Kawaguchi is a manga that already had a strong first impression before, and while Redwood was indeed cancelled, I think a lot of people, at least in the English-speaking community, really want him to come back stronger and better than ever, and finally reach the potential that his previous manga didn't. There are a couple of fragile spots in the magazine right now, and while I don't think just any manga can take them, I can definitely see Kawaguchi at his best be able to cut through and stay for at least a little longer than he did with Redwood. But really, only time and a couple more chapters will be able to tell. If you want to see me gush on the first chapter of Redwood, then click the video on the right. The playlist on the left is filled with all my first thoughts videos, and if you want to know my first thoughts on future weekly Shonen Jump series, you should probably subscribe, and if you watched till here, thank you very much, and I'll see you next video.